Picture this. A wealthy merchant's son kills a poor farmer's child in a drunken rage. The father demands justice, but the merchant simply pays off the local officials. The child's death goes unpunished. Sound familiar? This wasn't last week's news. This was everyday reality in ancient Mesopotamia until one king decided enough was enough. The year was 1754 BCE, and the sprawling river valleys between the Tigris and Euphrates had become a legal wasteland. Each city-state operated like its own little kingdom of chaos, where justice meant whoever had the most gold or the sharpest sword. Babylon, Akkad. Every settlement had its own rules, its own corrupt officials, its own version of what constituted fairness. Imagine trying to conduct business in such a world. A contract signed in one city might be worthless parchment in another. A crime that earned you a death sentence in Babylon could be perfectly legal behavior in Assyria. Trade routes became treacherous not just because of bandits, but because merchants never knew which set of arbitrary rules they'd face at the next checkpoint. The social fabric was tearing apart. Blood feuds consumed entire families across generations. Women had no legal protection. Children could be sold like cattle. The weak lived at the mercy of the strong, and the strong answered to no one. It was a world where might made right, and right was whatever the powerful decided it was on any given day. Enter Hammurabi, not yet the legendary lawgiver, but simply an ambitious young king who inherited a kingdom built on quicksand. Unlike his predecessors, who maintained power through force alone, Hammurabi possessed something revolutionary: vision. He understood that lasting empire required more than military conquest. It demanded something that had never existed before: universal law. But creating the world's first comprehensive legal system wasn't just about politics. It was about fundamentally reimagining what civilization could be. In temples across Mesopotamia, priest scholars began collecting every legal precedent, every dispute resolution, every custom that had ever been used to settle conflicts. They were building something unprecedented, a blueprint for human justice. The challenge seemed impossible. How do you create laws that work for nomadic herders and urban merchants? How do you balance the rights of masters and slaves? How do you codify justice when people can't even agree on what justice means? The answer would come carved in stone, literally and figuratively. What Hammurabi was about to create wouldn't just govern his kingdom, it would echo through every legal system that followed, including our own. In the scorching heat of the Mesopotamian desert, revolution was brewing. Not the kind fought with swords and chariots, but the kind that would reshape human society forever. 2,400 lines of text, each symbol carved with surgical precision into black stone, harder than granite. But this wasn't just writing. This was humanity's first attempt to capture the soul of justice itself, and the man wielding the chisel was about to become immortal. The royal workshop buzzed with unprecedented activity. Master craftsmen worked in shifts around the clock, their tools singing against the diorite as they carved what would become history's most influential legal document. Every strike of the chisel was supervised, every character inspected, every word weighed against the enormity of what they were creating. Hammurabi didn't choose diorite by accident. This volcanic rock was nearly indestructible, harder than most metals, resistant to weathering, immune to the passage of time. The message was unmistakable. These weren't temporary rules subject to royal whims. These were eternal principles, as permanent as the gods themselves. The stele began with a powerful image: Hammurabi receiving the laws directly from Shamash, the sun god of justice. But this wasn't mere political theater. For the first time in human history, a ruler was claiming that law transcended royal authority. Even kings were subject to divine justice. Even pharaohs couldn't rewrite the fundamental rules of civilization. The 282 laws that followed weren't random edicts thrown together by bureaucrats. They were the product of decades of legal scholarship, representing the distilled wisdom of countless generations. Property rights, family law, commercial regulations, criminal justice, every aspect of human interaction had been analyzed, categorized, and codified. Take law. 195. If a son strikes his father, his hand shall be cut off. Brutal by modern standards, but revolutionary for its time. It established that family relationships had legal boundaries. Parents weren't absolute dictators over their children, and children couldn't abuse their parents without consequences. It was primitive family law, but it was law nonetheless. The famous eye for eye principle wasn't primitive revenge. It was sophisticated legal theory. Before Hammurabi, justice often meant wildly disproportionate punishment. Kill someone's sheep, and they might burn down your house. Under the new code, punishment had to match the crime exactly. No more, no less. It was the world's first systematic approach to proportional justice. But the code revealed uncomfortable truths about Mesopotamian society. Law 202 showed the stark class divisions. If a free man strikes the cheek of a free man who is his equal, he shall pay 1 gold mina. If a man's slave strikes the cheek of a free man, they shall cut off his ear. Justice, it seemed, had different faces depending on who you were. The scribes weren't just copying laws, they were creating legal infrastructure. Every provision included enforcement mechanisms. Every crime had a specified punishment. Every procedure had defined steps. It was systematic, comprehensive, and utterly without precedent. When completed, the stele stood over 7 feet tall, weighing nearly 4 tons. It was placed in the temple of Marduk, Babylon's patron god, where any citizen could read it. But this accessibility was itself revolutionary. For the first time in human history, the law wasn't secret knowledge hoarded by priests and nobles. It was public, permanent, and universal. The psychological impact was immediate. Citizens who had lived their entire lives under arbitrary rule suddenly found themselves in a world where legal outcomes were predictable. Criminals knew their punishments in advance. Victims understood their rights. Society itself gained a new kind of stability. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect wasn't what the code said. It was what it represented. For the first time, humans had attempted to capture abstract concepts like justice, fairness, and order in concrete, permanent form. They had taken the chaos of human conflict and imposed rational structure upon it. The workshop fell silent as the final symbol was carved. What emerged wasn't just a legal code. It was humanity's first serious attempt to govern itself by reason rather than force. The defendant's name was Marduk Nasir, and he was about to make history. Not because he was important, he was just a common builder, but because his shoddy workmanship had caused a house to collapse, killing the owner's son. And now, for the first time ever, a written law would determine his fate. The courthouse of Babylon had been transformed. No longer were legal proceedings conducted in shadowy back rooms or decided by the arbitrary whims of local strongmen. Under Hammurabi's new system, justice was public theater, designed to educate as much as to punish. Citizens packed the galleries, witnessing the birth of legal precedent. Marduk Nasir stood before Judge Nabonidus, knowing exactly what his fate would be. Law 230 was crystal clear. If a builder builds a house for a man and does not make its construction firm, and the house collapses and causes the death of the owner's son, that builder's son shall be put to death. The punishment wasn't just death, it was the death of innocence for innocence, but reality proved more complex than carved stone. The victim's father, a grain merchant named Belshazzar, had insisted on using inferior materials to save money. Witnesses testified that Marduk Nasir had warned him repeatedly about the risks. The builder's young son, barely 12 years old, sat in the gallery, unaware that his father's professional decisions might cost him his life. This was the first great test of systematic justice. The law was unambiguous, but its application raised questions that would echo through legal systems for millennia. Should laws be applied literally, or should judges consider circumstances? Can justice be truly fair if it ignores context? Judge Nabonidus faced an impossible choice: follow the letter of the law and execute an innocent child, or interpret the spirit of justice and risk undermining the entire legal system. His decision would set precedents that would ripple through generations. In another courtroom, a different drama unfolded. Ishtar Lamasi, a physician, had attempted to save a nobleman's life by drilling a hole in his skull to relieve pressure. An advanced surgical technique for the time. The patient died, and now Law 218 demanded its price. If a physician performs major surgery on a free man with a bronze knife and causes the man's death, his hand shall be cut off. The physician's defense was compelling. He had warned the family that the procedure was dangerous. The patient was already dying. Without surgery, death was certain. With surgery, there was at least a chance of survival. But the law recognized no such nuances. Medical malpractice was medical malpractice, regardless of circumstances. These cases revealed both the genius and the limitations of Hammurabi's system. By creating predictable consequences, the code encouraged responsible behavior. Builders became more careful. Physicians studied their craft more diligently. Citizens understood their rights and responsibilities, but the system's rigidity created new problems. Some physicians began refusing dangerous cases, preferring to let patients die rather than risk their hands. Some builders inflated their prices to account for legal risks. The unintended consequences of systematic justice were becoming apparent. Commercial disputes showed the code's more successful applications. When merchant Nabusuma Iskun sold diluted wine as pure vintage, Law 108 provided clear recourse. If a tapster does not accept grain in payment for drink, but if she accepts money by the large weight and makes the value of the drink small, she shall be prosecuted and thrown into the water. The merchant's goods were confiscated and he was banished from the city. The wine case demonstrated the code's economic wisdom. By creating severe penalties for commercial fraud, Hammurabi's laws encouraged honest dealing. Trade flourished because merchants could trust that contracts would be enforced uniformly. The legal system became economic infrastructure. Family law cases were particularly revealing. When Lipit Ishtar accused his wife Ninhursag of adultery, Law 132 demanded trial by ordeal. If a finger is pointed at a man's wife because of another man, but she has not been caught lying with the other man, she shall jump into the sacred river for her husband. If she survived the river's currents, she was innocent. If she drowned, she was guilty. Modern sensibilities recoil at such justice, but the system had internal logic. In a world without forensic science, how could adultery be proven? The river ordeal provided a mechanism for resolving disputes that couldn't be settled through testimony alone. It was primitive, but it was systematic. Each case taught the same lesson. Systematic justice was better than arbitrary justice, even when the system was flawed. Citizens preferred predictable unfairness to unpredictable chaos. The code's greatest achievement wasn't perfection, it was consistency. As the sun set over Babylon's ziggurats, a new kind of civilization was emerging, one where laws, not men, held ultimate authority, where justice, however imperfect, was at least uniform, where the weak could invoke the same rules as the strong. The age of written law had begun. Today, a judge in New York deliberates over a medical malpractice case. She has access to expert witnesses, psychological evaluations, precedent databases, and rehabilitation programs. But as she weighs her decision, an ancient question haunts the courtroom. Would justice be better served by simply cutting off the doctor's hand? The ultimate confrontation has arrived. 4,000 years of legal evolution separate us from Hammurabi's stone tablets, yet the fundamental questions remain unchanged. When we strip away the technological sophistication and procedural complexity of modern courts, are we actually delivering better justice than those ancient Mesopotamians? The case for Hammurabi's system is more compelling than most people realize. Its greatest strength was absolute clarity. Every citizen knew exactly what would happen if they committed a crime. There were no plea bargains, no suspended sentences, no early parole. If you stole a sheep, you paid back 10 sheep. If you killed someone, you died. Simple, predictable, final. This clarity created something modern justice systems struggle to achieve: true deterrence. When punishment is certain and swift, crime rates plummet. Ancient Babylon had remarkably low crime rates precisely because potential criminals knew their fate was sealed the moment they acted. There was no gambling on lenient judges or skilled lawyers. Modern justice, by contrast, is a labyrinth of uncertainty. Identical crimes can result in wildly different sentences depending on the judge, the jurisdiction, the quality of legal representation, and countless other variables. This flexibility allows for nuanced justice, but it also creates the perception, and often the reality, of unfairness. The speed of Hammurabi's justice was another decisive advantage. Cases were resolved in days, not years. Victims didn't endure decades of appeals and retrials. Society didn't bear the crushing costs of prolonged legal proceedings. Justice was immediate, which reinforced its moral authority, but this efficiency came at a terrible cost: irreversibility. Once a hand was cut off or a life taken, there was no correcting mistakes. Modern systems, with their appeals processes and new evidence reviews, prioritize accuracy over speed. We accept delayed justice as the price of avoiding irreversible errors. The proportionality principle, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, was revolutionary for its time but seems primitive today. It limited revenge but didn't consider rehabilitation. Hammurabi's justice was purely retributive. Its goal was punishment, not healing. Modern restorative justice focuses on repairing harm and reintegrating offenders into society. Perhaps most jarring to modern sensibilities was the code's explicit inequality. Different punishments for different social classes violated every principle of equal justice. Yet this transparency might have been more honest than the implicit biases that plague contemporary courts, where wealth and race still influence outcomes despite legal equality. The real revelation comes when we examine what each system optimizes for. Hammurabi's code prioritized social order above individual rights. It was designed for a violent world where the primary goal was preventing society from descending into chaos. Individual justice was secondary to collective stability. Modern legal systems emerged from different priorities: human dignity, individual rights, rehabilitation over punishment. They reflect societies wealthy enough to afford extensive due process and sophisticated enough to believe in human redemption. But they also reflect societies where the primary threat isn't social collapse, but ensuring fair treatment for all citizens. Neither system is objectively superior because they're solving different problems. Hammurabi's code was perfect for its time and place, a harsh solution for a harsh world. Modern justice systems are optimized for democratic societies that can afford to prioritize individual rights over collective order. But what if we could combine their strengths? What if we could achieve the clarity and speed of ancient justice with the fairness and sophistication of modern systems? Some contemporary legal reforms are attempting exactly this: mandatory sentencing guidelines that provide clarity while preserving judicial discretion, expedited procedures that maintain due process, alternative dispute resolution that prioritizes restoration over punishment. The most profound lesson of Hammurabi's code isn't that it was better or worse than modern justice. It's that it represents humanity's first systematic attempt to govern by law rather than force. It established principles we still struggle with: proportionality, procedural fairness, equal treatment under law, limits on arbitrary power. 4 millennia later, we're still wrestling with the same fundamental tension. How do we balance individual rights with collective needs? How do we ensure justice is both fair and effective? How do we maintain order while preserving human dignity? Hammurabi's answer was carved in stone. Ours is written in statutes that can be amended, precedents that can be overturned, and constitutions that can be interpreted. Our systems are more flexible, more humane, more just, but also more complex, more expensive, and sometimes more frustrating. The black diorite stele stands today in the Louvre, a testament to humanity's eternal quest for perfect justice. We haven't achieved it yet, but we're still trying. That continuous effort, from Mesopotamian stone tablets to modern courtrooms, might be the most human thing of all. Perhaps the real question isn't whether ancient or modern justice is better, but whether we can learn from both to create something even better. The conversation that began 4,000 years ago continues today, and it's far from over. So what's your verdict? After this deep dive into legal history, do you think we've actually improved on ancient justice, or have we just made it more complicated? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this comparison opened your eyes to how justice has evolved, smash that like button and subscribe for more content that challenges everything you thought you knew about history. The past has more to teach us than we realize.